evening, everybody, and welcome to one of Simania Clinic's talks. We are going to be discussing the very important topic around mental health, as well as consciously realigning yourself and looking at the importance of self-care. Our guest speaker tonight, and a return speaker for us, in fact, is Lerato. She is the founder of Mental Matters, an organization that is focused on promoting mental health awareness, normalizing conversations about suicide, and dismantling mental illness stigma. She's also a mental health advocate, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network Fellow, and now a UPG sustainability leader. She's also passionate about women and youth empowerment. She believes that empowering women and youth plays a crucial role in the development of the society. As a result, decided to pursue a BA in Community Development Studies. With this ongoing quest to serve, she has been able to promote significant and positive change in communities and individuals through collaborating with local and global organizations to drive positive change and positive impact. In recognition of her efforts, she has been named one of the Mail and Guardian's top 200 young South Africans for 2021 in the health category, as well as a finalist for the Fabulous Woman Awards in the Resilient category. She takes pride in engaging in civically based approach to community building and is committed to a lifelong service based in leadership. Thank you so much, Lerato, for being with us this evening. It's really such a privilege to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thanks for having me. Coming back, well, as you said, returning on your platform. Thank you so much. And today, in fact, we're talking about addressing one of the topics that I'm actually quite passionate about. Of course, anything that has to do with mental health, I'll definitely raise my hand to just give insight and also share my personal experiences, because I think, as you know by now, that storytelling is something that I'm very passionate about because people can relate more to such. But before we get into the topic, I just want to give a brief introduction in terms of, the impact of the pandemic on our mental health. And as we know that many of us have experienced bereavement, isolation, loss of income, and a lot of fear. And obviously these are triggering to our mental health conditions, or at least exacerbating the existing mental health conditions. And this is something that I have experienced personally, found myself a lot more anxious and a lot more depressed during the pandemic. And I think that also many people, as a result, may be facing increased levels of alcohol use, insomnia. Then we know that, it goes on, GBV and so forth. So it's a lot that we have been dealing with. And as a result, I think that we've had it in social media. We've heard the word self-care, especially like COVID-19 hit. And I was like, what? Everyone's talking about self-care, And obviously this is something that I've had to look into more. What does it mean? Read about a little bit more. Also just find out, there's self-care advocates out there. There's things like self-care Mondays and self-care Sundays. And I thought that we can just unpack what that really means. What is self-care? What does it mean? And what does it look like? And obviously that will look different for everyone, but understanding just what it means can point us to the right direction and putting it into practice. Okay, so I'm going to start with the fact that before we address the issue of self-care, we need to identify, or at least go back to the drawing board of, we need to identify and be intentional about addressing the issues of mental health. If we cannot identify them, therefore we don't know where to, in fact, apply the self-care and why is it relevant. And this goes back to what I was just talking about, the impact that it's had on many individuals, especially for our country. We have to understand the state of mental health in our country. And we have seen reports coming out that we're also rating second in the world in terms of depression and suicide. And that already tells you that we have problems. We really have big problems. And I think that understanding the state of mental health in our country will help us also just tap into, or at least align ourselves in terms of applying the self-care in our lives. So just some fact or some reports or stats with regards to the state of mental health in our country. Only 5% of the South African national budget is spent on mental health care. Second one is 1 in 6 South Africans suffer with anxiety, depression, or substance use problems. The third one is only 8% of South Africans who need public health care for mental illness receive it. So that means that less than 1 in 10 of the people who actually need treatment actually receive the treatment. That is absolutely, we can already see that it's bad. And another one is that in South Africa, 23 suicides and 230 serious attempts are reported every day. And this was also reported by the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. And that in South Africa, only 27% of people suffering from severe mental illnesses ever receive treatment. And the next one, almost 75% of South Africans are not accessing any form of mental health care at all. And I can attest to this because I've had issues previously when I was diagnosed, when I was still very young. Part of me not getting treatment was because I could not access it. It's very difficult for one to get access, especially if you do not have something like medical insurance or your medical aid. And the last one is that there are only 18 beds for every 100,000 people available for mental health care treatment. So that is currently where we stand as South Africa. I don't know about you, but as for me, that really breaks my heart, especially for somebody who's so passionate about mental health and is really advocating for access to mental health, especially for marginalized communities. And therefore, mental health will always be a topic that we constantly need to talk about, raise awareness. And obviously, we do need a whole lot more of collaboration with the government from, NGOs and NPOs and businesses as well. Okay. So with that said, realignment, part of the topic tonight is about realignment, and I've had to think, what is realignment? What does that mean for me? And that for me means restoration. Pre-COVID, I don't think that any of us have suffered the way we have mentally pre-COVID. And somehow, somewhere, we sort of need to try and get back into the state of normality, of which it's very hard to imagine, in a time that we're living in. But I'm just going to try and bring in the topic of self-care and how it can actually help us, get back into restoring our mental health and just our health in general.
Loretta, let me come in there, just to make it a bit conversational. There is, I think the stats that you gave us that 1 in every 6 people actually abuse substances. I'm wondering of this statistic, how many of those people are actually professional people who are under severe stress currently because of COVID-19 and are actually having to take substances either to stay awake or to cope with their workload or to cope with their current stresses. For example, with the evolution of technology, and frequently now lots of meetings are held via Zoom or Teams or whichever format you'd like, even Google Meets, it seems like a person is working continuously from 7 to 7. What do you think is the best approach? And even to open it up to Dr. Libeko, what is the best approach for professionals in terms of dealing with their state of their mental health?
Sure. I think that, I mean, with COVID hitting us, we've had a lot of companies that actually took the initiative to introduce mental health, what do you call them? The mental health awareness programs or mental wellness, employee wellness programs. And I think that the first step is actually just at least accessing those resources that have been made available to you. And the nice part is that you still maintain your sense of privacy, because I know that's also like a very important thing. If you're working, you don't want people to know about your problems and your whatever's going on in your life. So accessing those kind of resources is something that is very helpful. Something that is very difficult to help people with is, in fact, acknowledging that they need help. So having those people around you that are able to actually tell you that, look, you need help, is also very important. So I always emphasize on having the right people surrounding you. So when things like this happen, you know, they are there or they are there for you to lean on them. So the first step is acknowledging, and then, you know, making sure that you access the resources that have been made available to you. And that can also mean your GP, because they are then able to diagnose you properly and refer you to the relevant people that can help.
Let me bring in Dr. Libeko here, who's got this science background and works in the field of science every day. In terms of mental health and wellness programs, do you see that frequently in the area of work that you're in?
So it's quite a difficult space. Why I'm saying this is, you know, from my professional space, there are spaces like that, but they're not, I haven't really come across like entirely dedicated spaces for, say, for example, a lecturer, a staff member. I know students have got student wellness centers, you know, around academia, but in terms of staff, I'm not sure if there's specialized spaces like that. From private sectors, yes, there is, but you know, in the academic space, I'm not aware of that. So just to touch on working long hours because of remote working, I think the most important thing, which is part of the topic, is, you know, being cognizant of your, you know, self-care, you know, being aware that you need to be able to have longevity in your mind, you know, have longevity in your productivity. And these things come about through rest. And you need to, as someone who's working from home, you need to understand that you're still working. So you must give yourself working hours. And outside of those working hours, then it's family time, it's you time. And this is very important for, you know, for people that are working from home. I know it's quite difficult to you know, to navigate these spaces. But I personally think, I don't work from home, but I personally think I would take it as, you know, working, you know, going to work, waking up in the morning and going to work. When work is done, then work is done. And I think if we get to be that self-aware and cognizant of, you know, the things that we need to do, those small habits that will allow us longevity in what we're doing and productivity, we just need to take those upon ourselves and do that.
Thank you, Dr. Libeko. Over to you, Lerato.
Moving on to, let's try and define what self-care is. And I mean, I read a lot of definitions, what it is, and I really like this one that says, self-care describes everything you do for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And the key thing here is intent. You need to be intentional about it, because it really sounds very easy to do, but it's not. especially for our generation, because look, we live to grind, for the hustle, it's very busy. We are very busy, and we sort of have to be aware and actually just sort of like schedule, like I used to say to people, like schedule it, because we schedule everything. A friend asks you to meet with them, and you're like, oh no, let me check my calendar and I will schedule you in, type of thing. And it's the same thing with self-care. We really need to be intentional about applying it in our lives. And it really just starts with, simple acts. It's not something that is very far-fetched. And for me, the biggest thing is that self-care is very practical. It has to be practical, or else if it's not practical, you sort of like cannot apply it or can't do it. It just becomes, a theory, and that's where it ends. So I've got here that, so obviously we also, as part of self-care, that we need to be conscious and aware of our well-being before we can actually achieve true self-care. So being conscious and aware is also something that is very important. Self-awareness. That way you are able to identify when your body says rest, you are able to identify that, look, I haven't been in a good space this week, or I've noticed that from last week, my mood is actually a little bit on the low side. So self-awareness is something that is also very important, and it will sort of guide you as to what it is that you need. So why is self-care important? Self-care encourages us to maintain a healthy relationship with ourselves. Not anybody else, but first thing with ourselves. We need good relationships with ourselves. And also so that we can also just transmit whatever positive energies we have to other people. I mean, as the saying goes, you cannot pour out of an empty cup. So I think that is the essence of the importance of self-care. And one thing that self-care is not is selfish. I know a lot of people, we are only learning this now, that putting yourself first is actually very important. And I know that it sort of goes against everything that we learned, as we were growing up, that we are part of a community and you need to put other people first. But in fact, self-care speaks to yourself. The word in itself says self, it's about you first and then everybody else. And as I've mentioned, that because we're a generation that just glorifies being busy and the hustle, we need to start questioning, is my business productive? And this is something that I've had to actually do this year, because I realized I'm so busy. And I've just had to take time off. And I said, look, do I really have to do everything that I am doing? Is it productive? How is it actually serving me? Is it a priority? So those are the questions that we need to ask. Mm-hmm. And an important thing is that we honor the work that we do, but in fact, we do not honor the body, the person who actually does the actual work. So then you need to sit back and ask yourself, is this person, how are you driving a car that actually doesn't have any fuel? How far is it going to get? Why are you driving a car that's on reserve? Is it in fact going to get you to your destination? And I think it's the same thing with regards to ourselves and our body. Okay.
Let me come in there again, Lerato, in terms of honoring your body and yourself. I mean, the idea or the notion that so many people work, but they also have side hustles, and that if you're not waking up at 4 and maybe sleeping, I don't know, at early hours of the morning, that you're not working hard enough to actually achieve your goals. But in fact, what you're saying is we need to reconsider our approach as to how we do our work smart and not necessarily hard, essentially.
100%. Yeah. I think I was saying to a friend of mine that it's actually really just getting boring. I know people just say everybody's not sleeping. You need to sleep 2 hours in order for you to seem like you are productive when you're doing something, but it's actually working against us. And I think what you're saying is very important. Like, work smart. That's the one. Work smart and not hard. Yeah. So what does self-care look like? I mean, now we sort of get the idea of what it is, but then we also need to define what does it look like. And I'll say that, I mean, obviously people can add on to the things that I'm going to list because it always looks different for everybody else. And I also want to highlight that self-care is not just, you cannot box it. So you cannot say my type of self-care is running. This month, maybe running may be your type of self-care, but in the following months, the next coming months, it's going to change. And that is okay. That is life. Change is a part of life. Evolving is a part of life. And what you may like today, you may not enjoy it tomorrow. So that is also something to note about self-care. So we constantly need to reinvent ourselves and also what self-care is. Mm-hmm. So the first thing, and this is also just personal, like a personal opinion, perfection does not exist in my world. So that is part of self-care. I would rather define what perfection looks like for me. People, we strive for balance, and we've been told that, yes, balance does exist, and you can be a mother, you can be, this amazing woman in the boardroom, you can come back home and cook, you can then do the laundry, you can do all these things. And by no means am I against that. Yes, we wear many hats. And this also goes for, our male counterparts. Yes, we can definitely do all those things, but I don't think it's possible to do them at the same time. And I've realized personally that when I am doing something, the one other thing will suffer. I can definitely not want to sit in the boardroom till 8 o'clock at work in the evening and also attend my daughter's whatever she's doing at school in the same evening. And that is perfectly okay. And that is why I say that perfection does not exist. So the moment I decided to say, look, it doesn't exist and that balance doesn't exist, it actually relieved a lot of weight from my shoulders. We put so much pressure on ourselves and strive that everything's going to happen at the same time. So we sort of need to, that's where prioritizing comes in. What is it? When you write exams, you literally just, it's an example, you just focus on that. And you sort of say, okay, I'm not going to go as much as I was. I'm going to focus on my books. So it's an example, you are prioritizing your exam so that you can do well. But obviously your social life is sort of suffering, but obviously it's not like a long-term thing that's going to happen. And I think we need to be okay with such things, prioritizing what is important for you. And the second thing is, I think I've mentioned it, that we need to be intentional when it comes to self-care. It sounds very easy to do, but very difficult to do. So it's something that we constantly just need to remind ourselves about, and also that it is not a far-fetched term and it's practical. So what is this practicality that I'm talking about? The first thing for me is pay attention to your physical health. Your body is likely an indicator of your mental and emotional well-being. So I have noticed that if I'm feeling tired constantly, like in the last 3 weeks, I was just feeling exhausted. It didn't matter how much sleep I got. And that was my body actually telling me that you're probably not drinking your water. Maybe you need to go out and just take a walk, or, you're probably not eating right. And when I look back, I'm like, yeah, all I've been doing is actually just getting takeaways. So your body will always be an indicator of, your well-being. So pay attention to your physical well-being. And how can you then apply self-care when it comes to that aspect of physical attention? So anything from movement, so body movement. And I mean, I've said that I dread going to the gym, but taking walks is very nice. If I'm going to take a walk with my daughter, that is something. So you can incorporate such things like taking a walk, or, whatever that it is, running. Some people enjoy running, whether it's boxing, whatever it is, just incorporate movement in your life. And part of in that physical aspect, eating healthy is also very important. Whatever healthy looks like for you. I mean, people will tell you I'm lactose intolerant. Some of them will say I'm a vegetarian. Some people, look, we all don't have to be vegetarians. And I think also this goes, I mean, you will have to consult your doctors to know what it is, what a healthy diet looks like for you. And that can be different from myself and yourself, Kim. So eating healthy, incorporating a good diet is also very important for our mental health. Getting enough sleep. I think you've also just highlighted that. Look, we are just so busy, man, and that we even forget to get good sleep. I think it has been, scientists have been saying that, they recommend that people get about 6 to 8 hours of sleep. We do it with our children. We force them to go, and have bedtime, but we don't have such, you still want to be waking up at 5 o'clock to go to the gym. You come back from work at 7. You are now doing what you call part of your side hustle, and you will then sleep at 4 a.m. You only, by the time you realize you're only sleeping 5 hours or 6 hours in a week, which is something that you actually require to, to sleep in a day, every day, not the whole week. And it's something that I've had to learn the hard way. Literally just setting, those reminders on my phone that, hey, it's actually bedtime. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't come easily, but it's like a habit. You sort of like build these habits, you work on them. So getting that sleep is very important. Something that I have incorporated, especially since the lockdown, working from home has allowed me to just put in those 15-minute naps. Naps are like very, very important. They have done an amazing job for me. And if it's not a nap, it's just taking a walk, because we're sitting down so much that we even forget to actually just incorporate that little movement. When we were at the offices, you would have to stand up and walk to the bathroom or walk to your colleague. But now you're just sitting at your workstation. You've got your water, you've got your food at your station. So there's no need for you to move. So it's very important to also just incorporate that. And another thing is identify the things that matter to you. So this may seem easy, but it can also be a challenging practice. So set goals for yourself, ask yourself tough questions. Things like, what makes me happy? What is it that I want to be remembered for when I pass away? Or what are my passions? How do I want to make a difference in the world? Do I want a family, or what is it that I want for my family? So those type of questions will then direct you to the things that actually matter to you. That way you are then able to prioritize, those things that actually matter to you. And another one is changing your mindset. So too often we focus on the negative things, especially with COVID, that we forget that there's still good things happening around us. The fact that you have woken up, somebody in fact did not see a day, somebody did not wake up, somebody didn't have the chance to say, I love you to their loved one. And those are the little things that we sort of have forgotten. So go back to the little things. Just being grateful, whether you're getting a gratitude journal or whatever it is, you are watching YouTube channels or whatever it is, that's just going to help you build that habit of just being grateful. Also, part of changing my mindset was taking a holiday in my 24 hours. So I realized, there's a lady that I was actually following, and she said, look, we work like 12 months in the year, and we sort of like just, dedicate these last 2 weeks of the year to take the big break and the holiday. But why can't we do that in our everyday life? And whatever a holiday means for you, if it's standing up and going to buy yourself coffee, or standing up and just, dancing to your favorite song for that day, consider that a holiday. So sort of like put it out there for yourself. It's just for yourself to say, look, I deserve a holiday every single day, and I don't have to wait for like December in order for me to actually just have my big break. And the last one I have on my list is to say no. Learn to say no and setting boundaries. I've had a difficult one with this one, but too many times we say yes to everything because we do not want to hurt the feelings of other people. And this is at work, this is at home, we do it with our kids, we do it with our friends, and it can actually take a toll on us. When you do this at the expense of your own peace or health, you are definitely, going against prioritizing yourself. So boundaries are very important. And saying yes to everything actually leads to burnout. I personally know it. So we don't want to be individuals who are like burnt out throughout the year simply because we haven't set boundaries for ourselves in the workplace, with our families. So that is very important. And those are just some of the self-care options that we can just apply practically to our lives.
Thanks so much, Lerato. Just a quick question. In terms of applying boundaries, and I'm going to speak from my personal experience, as much as I had a boundary set in terms of how I want to do things and the times that I want to work, I would have one of my bosses be calling me at 4 a.m. And if I don't actually pick up the call and respond and start with whatever they had decided I should be starting with on that day, the perception was almost like, oh, Kim is slacking. Kim, what's going on with Kim now? She's not doing what needs to be done. So you can have your boundary, but I think trying to get other people to respect that boundary and to stay steadfast in your belief to really implement the boundaries is critical, because it became a habit that now I would get calls at 3 and 4 in the morning and have to be functional throughout the day and come home and have to do whatever chores I had as well. So the boundaries one was, it really touched home for me. It's a key one. And I think when the boundary is set, that people also just have to be a bit reasonable in terms of what you can achieve in a day.
Yeah, 100%.
For now, I don't know, Dr. Libeko is on. Do you perhaps want to make a comment with regards to boundaries, and how do you actually maintain your boundaries if people are not really respecting them?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important aspects with regards to setting boundaries is whether at the beginning, from the very onset, when you get into a workplace, you already come with those boundaries set. So if you come with boundaries set, nobody's going to step outside of those boundaries because they're already set. So for instance, the boss is never going to call you at 4 a.m. because you've never picked up their calls at 4 a.m. And you've never entertained that part. And the boss is never going to have issues when you have a sick child because they know you're a family man, you're a family woman. So those things you walk into the workplace with, and then nobody tends to step on them. But sometimes, because we are new at the workplace, because we are new wherever we are, we put in an extra effort, and that extra effort becomes an expectation from someone, from an employer, or from a relationship to start off with. So that really works against us in the long run when you now try to implement, these boundaries, whereas you didn't really set them from the get-go. So I think that's an important aspect to say. When you walk into a workplace, into anything, just come with those boundaries set and articulate those very clearly. Then it's easier for each and every person to respect each other in such spaces. That's what I do. when I walk into a workplace, people know I've got family, I've got, that comes before everything. So if there's an emergency at home, work is going to stop. It's a bit of an unnegotiable there. And, with that said, I put in an extra effort on daily basis so that if I have to attend to my family need, there's no issues of, you work your minimum hours, that type of thing. So that's quite important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that kind of links back into what Lerato actually said with regards to being intentional about what you want to do and how you want to achieve it. So definitely, I think both of them are interlinked with each other.
So yeah, I think I'm done. I just have one more point that speaks to, so how can we then get the help that we need? I mean, whether it is you recognizing that you probably your mental health is like, your mental wellness is a bit on a low side, or maybe you just want to get better at setting boundaries. And I think that one of the first things you can do, obviously, with regards to your mental wellness is go see a doctor. So the first step, I know a lot of people, when they're thinking mental health, then they start thinking of psychologists and psychiatrists, and that can come at a very high cost, especially in South Africa. As I mentioned, that it's very, very difficult for people to access mental health care. So starting with your local GP, they are then able to refer you to the relevant people and make that assessment to say, look, okay, maybe you need to go see a psychiatrist, or maybe you need a psychologist. So the best places, that's where you can start. And we take for granted the people around us, our friends and our family members. So somebody that you actually trust, obviously, because mental health is still a bit of a sensitive issue. Sometimes we're not comfortable with letting everybody know, or even your family members. So maybe that one friend that you really trust, that is your confidant, talking about the things that are bothering you, or just, venting on somebody that you're comfortable with, is actually very, very helpful. Something that we take for granted. But there are days when I'm not feeling well and I just pick up the phone and call my mom. And just hearing her say hi, then I just start crying, because she brings that comfort to me. So little things like that are really helpful. Going to your nearest clinic, if you can obviously not afford to go to a private GP, going to your nearest clinic, they will then be able to assist you and also just direct you to the relevant people. And then we've got free telephonic services where they're able to counsel you, or just, talk about whatever that's going on, whether it's you being suicidal. So I know that in South Africa, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group is quite big. It's a toll-free line that you can just contact. And if you also just go on Google and just Google free counseling services, there's quite a number of them. And I see a lot of people coming out, even on social media, putting up in their local communities that there's psychologists who are now even, just putting up their time out there and saying, look, I'm willing to take in 5 people this month. Hit me up if you actually need help. So also just staying connected and just finding out where you can get help in terms of social media. There's a lot of people coming out and putting that information there. And also, like I said, fortunately, well, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, not all workplaces have got them employee wellness programs, but if you have one, take advantage of those. I know that, as Dr. Lebeko said, that unfortunately not everyone has got, and even if they have, it's a problem actually just endorsing those programs. But if there is one, just try and take advantage of that. And also reading is very important, something that we take for granted, but just reading or just, Googling something and reading about a topic that you're actually interested in, for instance, if it's boundaries, there's a lot of blogs that you can actually get information on. I also have my website, I actually have a blog where I discuss all things mental health, from personal stories, other people's stories, research that's been done about how you can set boundaries, things like how to improve your mood. There's a lot of people actually putting out information in terms of how you can actually do those things. So whether it's you watching a TED talk, you are getting yourself educated. So that is an important thing. And obviously, if you can afford things like getting a life coach, which is very important now in our day and age, they're able to equip you with certain skills in life, then go ahead and get those people to help you. So the important thing is lean onto the people around you and the resources that have been made available to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lerato. Thank you so much. Dr. Libeko, is there anything from yourself?
Yes. So I just wanted to ask a question to Lerato or to everybody else in the platform. So currently we are sitting at probably over 570 days of national lockdown. And so what is your perspective about, just the idea and the notion that 570 days down the line, we're still in lockdown, in terms of some people might have, anxieties about, there's a bit of fluidity in terms of job security, in terms of access to, to food, access to stuff like that. And how has that potentially impacted on us rising to number 2 in the world in terms of mental health issues, comparing how long countries have been in lockdown and what we are currently experiencing. Secondly, I think this is a worldwide issue where there's a notion of, vaccines being mandatory. And, for people that maybe they've got, valid reasons, which I don't know, say, for instance, medical reasons, religious or whatever reasons that, they feel like, taking vaccines is against whatever it is. Now there is a move towards mandatory vaccinations. I was listening to some talk about UCT moving towards, or planning on moving towards uh, mandatory mass vaccination to the UCT community. And it was quite a high and spiky debate, and I listened to students' concerns and everyone. And just adding on to that, the fact that now the vaccination poll has been, opened up for children from the ages of 12 to 17 without the parents' consent. So these things, how do they potentially impact on, how society is feeling, those little anxieties and everything that goes around with that?
Sure. Okay. With regards, I'll just respond to the first question. I mean, as you mentioned, you're like 500, and I'm just like, are we already there? That's almost 2 years. And I think that it's still very stressful to a lot of us. And I think the sentiment around is that, or at least the people around me, is that, can we get back to some form of, normalcy? I mean, we're missing our concerts, we just miss a whole lot of things. And obviously the festive season is approaching, and you're hearing a lot of people saying, are we going to be having the same situation that we had last year? I mean, people haven't gone home. We have people who, and especially in South Africa, they would move from, their rural homes and come and work in Joburg. And at a time when it's the festive season, they would then go home. And some of them, in fact, it's the little things. And I think a lot of people may say, yeah, but that is something so little, but it actually has an impact on a person, because we are meant to actually interact with each other. We are human. We need that interaction. We need, the emotional aspect of, things need to actually be attended to. And I think that, it's still very stressful. Personally, I am also just feeling it. There are days when I'm just like, no, I can't live like this anymore. And it really just gets to my head. But I think that in the same breath, we sort of have to adjust if we haven't already forcefully adjusted, to the state and whatever that is happening in the world. And it's very scary. I mean, every day you sit and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to have a job. You hear of the unemployment rate for the youth that is just spiking, and you are like, there is no hope. So there is still a lot of negative feelings. And I don't think it's because people don't want to actually, get up and just try and, sort of like be like, I'm adjusting to this new normal that we have. But it's because every day there is something that is sort of, highlighting the situation. And it's very difficult to get out of. But I think that the biggest thing that will help us is maintaining, the community aspect of just being human. We are human. There's that saying, ubuntu muntu ngabantu, and it's something that I have seen that more than any other time in our lives, it's very, very important. And that is the only way I am surviving. That is the only way I'm coping, just leaning onto the people that are around me. And that's my take on it, or how I'm feeling about it. And with regards to your second question or comment on the vaccine, it's definitely like sort of caused like this rift, and there are these two worlds. We're already going through so much. And now I've heard like other people saying, I mean, there's COVID, and now we have to fight the battle of the vaccines. And I was like, sure, that is hectic. Like, we are already in a battle, and obviously that is also something that we may not actually think that it plays an impact on our mental health or just our well-being. But I think that it's very important. And like I say, we mustn't take education for granted. It's very important, for professional people to keep on educating and just sending out the same message that, look, I mean, I always say that if a scientist is going to tell me that it's done this way, look, I'm going to take it. And that is just me, simply because if you do not have the educational background, then I don't have anything to stand on. So I think that just that education aspect of it is very important. Let's just keep preaching the message. And also, just sometimes the only way that people learn is if you just sort of like make them understand the consequences of whatever actions they're taking. So I think communicating to them that, look, this does not only impact you, but it also impacts the economy. The sooner we can get this done, the sooner we can actually get back to that normal that we are actually talking about. And I actually heard my daughter say today at school that, yes, mommy, they said vaccines are actually available for us. And yes, there were kids who were like, no, I'm not going to take the vaccine. And obviously, this is something that these are the conversations that the parents are having at home. So you can already see then, the children will obviously do as they do at home. So that, I think, just communicating that and the education aspect of it, we can never have enough of raising awareness. I think, that is it from my side.
Thanks, Loretta. We have Happy and Ray Lee in our audience this evening. I'm not sure if they'd like to make any comments or pose any questions. I don't think there's anything as yet. Happy, is there anything from yourself? I saw you had actually put a chat in the box earlier where you actually commended Larato for saying that there's no perfection, that, you know, it's difficult to achieve balance. There's no balance, but rather balance in certain areas of your life at a particular time. I don't know if you'd like to add on to that, or would you like me to proceed? Okay, so I'll just make a comment then with regards to the second part of Dr. Libeko's question. I think it's so difficult to actually implement or ensure that the vaccine becomes compulsory for everybody because the attorneys are then going to get involved. It's almost like making your HIV test compulsory before you start working. I mean, in certain areas, depending on what work you do, it can be compulsory, but it is going to be a very, very tricky one. And I foresee lots of labor cases coming about from that. In terms of government, I think that they are potentially going to balance the interests with the private sector so that the private sector, in fact, are the group of people that are pushing compulsory vaccination rather than having it come from government. So that's going to be a very, very tricky one to balance interests both of the economy and of the people alike, because if we are vaccinated, it makes it a bit easier for us to really open up our economy as a whole. So it is a difficult balance, and it's going to be interesting to see how that actually plays out. And particularly for UCT, because UCT also now has their online school. So it would be interesting to see, would it be compulsory for students at UCT to be vaccinated, or would it be compulsory for certain faculties, maybe like the medical faculty, or how are they actually going to go about that and roll it out? So I think that the tensions will be, you know, strong with regards to actually massively not just rolling out the vaccine, but making it compulsory. What were the views of the students actually with regards to that?
I think it's always two-sided. There's very strong cases that people make. So there's two major reasons why people are not for mandatory vaccinations. The first one would be there are religious and cultural influences that lead to people thinking, I can't take a vaccine because of the cultural or religious spaces. And secondly, it would be something along the lines of, there's not enough education, there's not enough information that's out there that guarantees me the safety of the vaccine. Whether and also there's the literature that's out there. There's been a lot of retractions on literature. There's been a lot of here and there. And the other thing that people say is that there is alternatives to vaccines, things like therapies and alternative treatments like antiretrovirals, which I think have not gained a lot of momentum, but vaccines have actually gained a lot of momentum. So people are questioning what was the rationale behind vaccine gaining so much momentum as opposed to other therapies, treatment, because vaccination is preventative, but treatment.
I know. I think we've lost Dr. Libeko there. There's a problem with network. That's such a pity. But Dr. Libeko, can you hear us?
Yes. Sorry, my network is a bit poor, so I'm on and off. So I think that for me was quite interesting because there were robust discussions from both ends, and I foresee a lot of hiccups in terms of how the whole thing is going to be rolled out. Why? Because there's lots of reasons that are very valid why people feel very uncomfortable to take vaccines, and we need to understand that. But I think UCT in general, being UCT, it is going to happen. And from the chief operating officer, the energy was there in terms of it is going to happen. And people are even asking, are they going to lose their jobs because now vaccination is becoming mandatory and they're not going to take vaccines? And there was a very political way of approaching that question, but at the end of the day, people might be excluded and people might be expelled.
Wow.
That's just the way it was, and
Oh.
it was quite hard.
Mm. But if we
And
bring that
yeah,
back, then
and then
sorry, Dr. Lebeko, continue.
yes,
I thought you were finished. Sorry.
yeah. So and then if you look at countries like Lesotho, where I come from,
Yeah, the network is a big problem. But what I was going to come in and say in terms of Dr. Libeko's statement there, so if there's potential exclusion of people based on them not getting a vaccine, how does that relate back to what we're speaking about today in terms of realignment and restoration and, understanding your boundaries? Because now if you not compliant, even though you have a boundary, really that boundary is going to be pushed to the direction of the employer or to the direction of the person that's educating you. And if you want to achieve your end goal, then you're going to compromise where your boundary is actually being set. And how does that affect you then mentally in terms of restoring where you want to be post-COVID? Or if we can't say post-COVID, like post this lockdown era.
Yeah.
Makes it extremely tricky and difficult, really. And
It
restoration,
does.
it's such a big word
yeah.
that you actually used. I loved that. Restoration, realignment. How do we then realign after lockdown?
Sure.
So the difficult part was there's a legal, I don't know if it's a legal term or a legal phrase or something along the lines of disaster management and all that. So that says an individual's rights are secondary to the community's well-being. So meaning if you think you have a right not to vaccinate because of it's a human right, freedom of choice, that is very secondary to the wellness of the community. And the community is everybody must be vaccinated to achieve herd immunity and for protection of the entire community. So that's where the whole debate comes into play.
Very interesting one. Very interesting to see how that's actually going to roll out. With regards to that, I don't know, Dr. Lebeko, do you have any other questions for Lorato before we actually begin to close? And then I think we can summarize. And I think we've really given our audience quite a bit to think about today and see, how are they taking care of themselves during these difficult times? I mean, we've been posed with so many different debates and policies and acts at the moment. So what are you doing to take care of yourself? What's your self-care routine? Are you doing enough? Are you having your mini holidays? What are we doing to take care of ourselves and our mental health?
Nothing from my side. We can close off.
And
okay.
Any summary from you? Would you like to summarize?
Okay, I'll be fairly short because I think the discussion today was quite, was quite self-explanatory, and I think there's a lot that we learned. Thank you, Lerato, for always coming through and for always just blessing us with, those nuggets of wisdom from the personal perspective and from the professional journey that you've taken. And I think to the audience, what's important to note, from this talk was, what really was the highlight was the issue of self-care. And this self-care comes in packaged in many different ways. And, some of those ways would be, setting boundaries so that people can respect those boundaries, and also setting boundaries for people, for yourself, and I think Lerato mentioned things like, even set your own alarm to say it's time for you to go to bed. And those are important aspects where, living in a new norm where we're working from home, we tend to spend 12 hours in front of our computers, in front of our laptops. And that really for us to be able to enhance self-care, it's got to stop. We need to now put time frames in the number of hours that we put in at work, which is at home. And also, the balance of, trying to revitalize your mental state by staying healthy. That is healthy eating, healthy sleeping, as well as exercise. Those are important aspects that will actually allow us to achieve this notion of self-care during these very difficult times. And I think the other thing that you highlighted was, where we are as South Africa in terms of the statistics regarding mental health care, mental health issues. And I was quite shocked to see that we are quite high in the world rankings. And that really, sends a strong message to the government to say, there's lack of access to treatment of this nature. What is it that government is doing to increase accessibility of mental health care? And also, what is it that government is doing to educate and to normalize people coming forward and saying, I have got, these issues, just like any other condition, that, it has to be treated equally. And also the support from families. We need to be strong support structures for people around us who are suffering from these such issues. And I think today was really quite a nice platform for us to do self-introspection and also to look at where we're standing within, the political, the sociological, as well as the psychological realms of our country and the lockdown in general. So thank you very much, Lerato, for that. And thank you very much, Dr. Lamont. Over to you, Dr. Lamont.
So thank you to our audience for being here this evening. And as Dr. Libeko has said, a big thank you to Lerato for coming again and actually giving us such an insightful talk and really raising the bar in terms of creating awareness around mental health, opening up the discussion. And I think there's been many nuggets of wisdom throughout the talk and many questions that have been raised as to how can we actually approach this and what's the best strategy for one to use. With that said, I'd like to close the talk with a quote from a gentleman called Matt Haig. Mental health problems don't define who you are. They are something you experience. You walk in the rain and you feel the rain, but most importantly, you are not the rain. Continue to see hope in all of your circumstances. Thank you for participating this night. Have a good evening further. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.